Welcome to Bankole's Nation. I'm your host, Bankole Thompson. Coming up, our conversation with the president of the Detroit City Council, James Tate. The new council leader will talk to us about his vision for 2026, working with the new administration of Mayor Mary Sheffield. It's all coming up on this week's episode of Bankole's Nation. Stay with us. All right, let's bring in the newly elected president of the Detroit City Council, James Tate. Thank you so much for being here, Council President.
Yeah, thank you for having me as well. I'm a little under the weather today, as you could probably hear, and I know what I look like and I see. But
Right.
whenever I get an opportunity to be with you, I think that's an important time to talk because you've
Well,
got real issues on tap.
no question. Well, let's begin with the new year. We've moved away from 2025. We're now in 2026. Detroit has a new administration a new mayoral administration in new Mayor Mary Sheffield, the elected mayor of the city of Detroit. And I'm curious from you, though, what the next 4 years would look like. Obviously, no mayoral administration will succeed without, of course, the collaboration or without working with the Detroit City Council, the check and balance of city government. I want to get your take. Let's begin with that in terms of what the next 4 years looks like for you under your leadership vis-a-vis the new mayoral administration of Mary Sheffield.
Gotcha. Well, I'll say just personally, I have
Right.
I have a really good relationship with Mayor Sheffield. As she served as the council president and I was pro tem, we had an opportunity to have numerous conversations about, not necessarily about mayoral plans, but just plans for the city, period. Things that we want to see happen, things that negotiation points with the former administration that did not necessarily reach the point that we wanted to see. So I'm excited about the opportunity for many of those things that we discussed, dealing with the people, to come to fruition. Pleased with some of the items I've seen come forward thus far. As we know, this is a strong mayor form of government, and many times the administration starts a lot of the operational issues, policies, and then council gives the thumbs up, thumb down, or we negotiate to the point where we come to some level of agreement. For me as council president, I want to work with each one of my colleagues to make sure that we are able to work collaboratively with the mayor. But as I've said before, working collaboratively doesn't mean just rubber stamping. It means pushing where we can as needed. Also recognizing the climate that we're in. I mean, there's some things that we want to do holistically as individuals and as a body. But the financial climate, the political climate makes things very, very, very difficult to get some of that across. But that's my focus as council president, to bring some level of unity amongst the body as it relates to these real present issues for our residents.
Right. And before we get into that, and of course, we know what all the stuff that's playing out in Washington, in Minneapolis, and you name it. But I'm just curious in terms of when you were installed as council president, right away you made it clear that this would not be a rubber stamp city council. Why did you feel the need to send that signal?
Well, because one, we as city council have to have a legislative agenda, and
Right.
I've worked over the years to get to that point. I'll say that I was not successful. We had a few starts and stops, but last year I was able to get into our city council rules an actual process that created a legislative agenda solely by council, which would allow for the body to one, measure itself upon our wishes and our dreams and our hopes, but also gives the community an opportunity to see if we have been able to accomplish those things that we've set out for. So I'm very pleased about that. Now we actually have a pathway where it's not just talk. It's now we're coming together, creating a legislative agenda, hopefully ticking them off, at a rapid pace. But if not, we should be out explaining to the community why they haven't been accomplished. But even more than that, it gives us more drive as a body to work towards those things. And the reason I say it's important for legislative agendas because as long as we have council members essentially fending for themselves or for ourselves independently in our districts and things that are on our hearts, it leaves your colleagues issues potentially on the table and outside. So I think it's very, very, very critical so that we work as a body, as a unit, to move forward the policies that we believe should be implemented. And of course, as I said, work collaboratively with the mayor, but we have to know what our true north is as a body.
Right, and I want to get into that as well, and we'll come to your legislative agenda. But of course, I want to also state that I think aside from the Michigan House of Reps and the Michigan Senate, the biggest legislative body in the state of Michigan is the Detroit City Council. It's also a big stage. The issues that you debate does play out around the state and sometimes plays out around the country. So it's important, of course, in terms of the role that council plays here, despite the city charter having a strong mayoral, administration, but the council does have significant muscle that it can flex. Let's get into the legislative agenda for you as the president of council. What are some of the things that you're planning on bringing to the table? Because as president, you get to control the gavel and you get to set the agenda as well.
Yeah. So
and you get to count the votes too.
Yeah. Well, for me, again, while I am the president, I'm the leader of the body. I want to move our body in a certain in a certain direction, but it's very critical that I pull all of those things that my colleagues want as well. But I'll say just for me, I'm interested in affordable, accessible, attainable housing. That is, critical, in the city of Detroit. But there's no real, one item solution to this challenge. When we look at the cost of building in downtown and the cost of building in our neighborhoods, it's the same. When we talk about incentives to get structures that have been vacant, dilapidated for 20, 30, 40 years, those incentives are available not just in downtown, but in our neighborhoods as well. The challenge is, return on investment. A lot of the development entities, they know that they can get a much better return on their investment in downtown and midtown and now Corktown. But we're doing everything we can to try to incentivize them to also work in our neighborhoods. In District 1, I'll just say we've got multiple, and I put air quotes, affordable housing units that have been recently built and in progress right now. But as we all know, the biggest challenge with that, again, here's the C word, challenge, is that the AMI doesn't reflect the true level of affordability for Detroiters. And we're stuck in that situation. So if we're receiving any federal funding for any of these projects, we have to use the federal AMI. Now, if that changes, we have a different ballgame. But part of the reason for my usage or my allowance of the usage of those incentives is because many times these developers have an opportunity to develop and build without having any component of even a minuscule piece of affordable housing. So that gives us a bit of leverage in terms of trying to find a part of the solution. And we're not seeing affordable housing solely for those who are making 40,000 and below. We're now seeing that for people who are making 100,000 because of debt that they have. And we have to figure out solutions for them as well. It may seem like we're not keeping our eye on the ball, but several folks that I know are making 130,000 in their household, clearly, and that does not meet the federal AMI. But they need help. They need help. I mean, 3 years ago now, 3 years ago, came up with a program to allow for residents to have private trees on their own properties cut or trimmed by the city of Detroit. Never had a program like that before, and had to fight for about 3 years to get it there because the administration continued to say that it was a lending of credit and it was a violation of the law. Finally got to the point where we were able to agree that just like we have roof repair for seniors and we have these other programs, this is an opportunity. The reason that's important is because we have deferred maintenance on many of these huge trees that we have in our city, and they were falling, destroying neighbors' homes, falling and destroying their own homes. So while it doesn't get a whole lot of fanfare,
Mhm.
it is a major issue in our community. And 15,000, 20,000 sometime to trim these trees are dollars that our residents don't have. So, and didn't put a income requirement on that either. And that was very important because again, we've got folks who are making 100,000 or so, and they say, I need help as well. I need extreme help because of these other issues I have in my household.
Listening to you speak, it looks, and of course it's real, that Detroit has an affordability problem. We have an affordability crisis. The question, though, is, are we becoming so unaffordable to a point where people may feel like they're getting kicked out of the city?
Oh, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
go ahead.
No, I mean, absolutely, and that is the again what we have to always balance. I mean, it is not as simple as one thing that's going to get us to that point. I look at my neighborhood in Brightmoor. I've got family in Brightmoor. My wife was born and raised in Brightmoor. We just moved my mother-in-law out of the neighborhood because of some challenges that she was having, in old age. So I love Brightmoor, but Brightmoor, these folks are making, if you depending on who you talk to, between 22,000 and 26,000 a household of four in that neighborhood. There's no way that these folks can compete, right? And the level of vacancy in the community is huge. So we're moving forward to try to redevelop Brightmoor, but how do you do that in a situation where people are making $22,000 to $26,000 a household? Soon as we move some dirt, rents go up. Soon as we start talking about it, rents go up. And that neighborhood doesn't have a commercial corridor. So we've got to figure out, chicken or egg. Which one do we work on first, the neighborhood or the commercial corridor? And we're in that process right now. I think we have to do both. And I've been very transparent with the residents, and they actually want to see, these big houses. They want to see a transformation. We started with the Brightmoor Framework Project, and we've got a stormwater project going on there. Last year, I put $1 million into the budget to upskill residents in Brightmoor so that they can participate in some of the projects that are happening or pending in the neighborhood. And if they don't want to participate in those projects, they will still take those skills and be able to use them elsewhere. $1 million. So it's going to help. We've already got a few success stories. We got one woman who was making, she was unemployed, and now she's making $60,000, excuse me, $60,000 a year. But that has to be replicated. But that costs money.
So much of this will have to be addressed by the kinds of policies that the council adopts under your leadership. And of
Yes.
course, the administration of Mary Sheffield is willing to come to the table and agree with you on some of these policies. I'll give you a quick example. I went about a year and a half ago, I think I attended a public hearing at Cass Tech High School, had to do with District Detroit, the development with District Detroit and so forth. And there were a couple of senior citizens who showed up at that public hearing relating to District Detroit and the Illich development and all of that stuff. And I remember speaking to some of them right after that public hearing, and this is what they said. They said, "Listen, Bankole, we've lived in Midtown for years. When I started, this woman told me when I started living there, I was paying like $500 a month. But now my rent has tripled in some of these buildings in Midtown. And these are seniors who have worked in the city, who have given so much of their money, so much of of who they are to the city. And now she's saying that she can't afford that a District Detroit development, as an example, is something that's basically going to gentrify Midtown, and basically she's not going to be able to afford to live in that place anymore because her rent has basically tripled. The other day, just for MLK on Martin Luther King's birthday, I was invited to speak at the River Towers apartment on East Jefferson, one of the largest senior citizen buildings in the city of Detroit. 430 seniors live in that building. When I went to speak to them as their MLK speaker, again, council president, the question of affordability came up, about these buildings and whether they're getting renovated the right way and what is the city doing relating to landlords and so forth. So we have this crisis, and I'm curious from you, though, what council can do to address some of these issues here that people are dealing with in Brightmoor, but also we have senior citizens who feel like they've come to a point where, the water, they're in an ocean where the water is almost above their nose.
Yeah, I mean, so what we have to also do is not treat the city of Detroit as if it's its own island by itself.
Right. Yeah.
What you're just talking about, Bankole, is being replicated all across this country. And so when we see the cost of living just increasing, and we see that the pay is suppressed, and especially for our seniors who have now gotten outside of their work years and they're ready to just live the rest of their life comfortably, not trying to have extravagance, but comfortably. It is not an easy fix for us. I mean, we have tried to identify how just one small thing, rent control. We're not allowed to do that in the state of Michigan. And we have pushed our legislators in the past when we had a much more friendly state legislation to move in that direction, and it stalled, didn't go anywhere. So we are creatures of the state. We're doing our best to try to address some of those particular issues, but the other part we have to look at is that many of these facilities, these buildings, are privately owned, and so it allows them to increase the rent. It allows them to, well, I'll just say allows them to increase the rent. But from our standpoint, we have to do a much better job as it relates to the maintenance of those buildings. And I know that, one of the events, again, I'm under the weather. One of the events that I was going to be participating in was a press event with the mayor with a new proposal that she's moving on to do just that. Get building and safety out to these senior buildings in a way that actually matters, is meaningful, and has impact. So what we would have is building and safety. They'll go out and do an inspection, and then it just stops right there. We have elevators that are in bad shape, and it stops right there. We know it, but we don't end up getting to the point where we, as a city, lay the hammer on those who actually own these properties. Now, I'll tell you, as much as community engagement that I do, I host 4 community meetings every month. I only know what I know. And so if once I become aware of it, I don't care what district it's in. I've gone out and worked with the folks in Hemahoe in the downtown area and got them relief, sat down with the building owner. They had another project, as I was the chair of planning and economic development, had another project that they were trying to move. I refused to move that project until they took care of the residents who were at the Hemahoe at that time. Now, there's never going to be a situation where everybody is 100% satisfied with everything. But we, as a body, again, have to make sure that we use all of our legislative powers as well as our influence to get these things rectified. But I have to say again that it's critical that that relationship with the administration is intact, because they are the muscle behind our policies. We can write words on a piece of paper all day long, but when it comes to the actual execution, there has to be some level of cooperation and then follow up and then holding folks accountable. And I'm looking forward to that with this particular project from what I heard, but we weren't getting that like it should have been done in the previous administration. I think the previous administration did a lot of great things, but there's certainly some areas of improvement that I'm looking forward to my colleagues and the new mayor working towards addressing.
And the other issue, of course, that well, the other item I want to mention is that as council, you do control the budget. That's an incredible leverage that you have over any administration in terms of being able to bring on board, the plans and the proposal, the vision of the city council itself to work alongside the vision of the mayoral administration, because you control the budget. So I'm curious to hear from you in terms of, the budget hearings are going to be coming up. Is it in March?
February, March, yeah, but really kicks in earnest in March.
Right. What are the top 3 items that you're looking for, let's say in the first 6 months of governance of this administration and the city council that you're looking to address?
Yeah, last year we provided an infusion of funds into our public transportation, and certainly plan on seeing that even more so and pushing for that. I have colleagues who want to see the same. It's just a matter of, again, how far can we go that doesn't take away from some other very, very needed service that we have in the city of Detroit. The other, as I mentioned before, is providing an opportunity for residents to have affordable, accessible, attainable housing.
Right.
Are there any subsidies that are available that could lead to assistance in ways that we have not in the past? Paired with that is not just a subsidy for those who are not making income and being able to make ends meet, but what are the areas where we can again upskill and provide folks with assistance so that they can make wages that are meaningful to them and their family. That is also a part of this training. We have a department that could work on that and has been working on that. We did it and had tremendous success during the with some of those COVID dollars that we use. And I can just roll out a success story after success story, but we don't have those dollars anymore. So now we have to be more creative in how we reproduce some of those programs that we have, learn to earn, et cetera, et cetera. I would say, and this is not so much just the budget itself. I think it's critical to make sure that we don't run a deficit, because if we do, that changes the whole calculus of our ability to run the city with the FRC, and that's real. Thus far, and I have my meeting right now. After this one, I have a meeting, a Zoom meeting with the FRC on what and where we are currently with our finances. We look pretty good, as it relates to their oversight. But politically, we have to make sure that we stay abreast of all the basically the tone and tenor in Lansing. So the budget, the budget. When you talk about the budget, and you've seen many of those budget hearings, all of the stuff that these department heads are coming to say, they all sound good. They're worthy. There's no bad thing that I say, me personally,
You
have
think the
seen.
department heads, they talk a good game?
It's not just they talk a good game, but they fill in gaps. It's all about the execution, right? That's what it all comes down to. So we as a body, we provide these departments the funding. That department now has a role and a responsibility to execute all those things that they said through contracts that comes back our way. And then we have the ability to now inspect and hold them again accountable to what they promised. But that's after, right? But it still is in that space. I know that there's this concern that a lot of our contractors that come our way are not Detroit contractors and vendors, and that is the case in some certain in certain circumstances. Excuse me, and we're working to increase the numbers of Detroit vendors and contractors who are aware of the process. But that again is we have to work with who's in front of us and not we're limited to those who actually go through the process of registering with the city, making sure that they have the bonding, making sure they have all those things. And if they don't, how do we get them to that point?
So
We're actively doing that.
so the bonding issue becomes that's a problem because I know I have spoken to over the years. I've actually have been African American contractors who have reached out to me. I remember one time one contractor, prominent contractor, actually reached out to me to intervene in a case he had with Mayor Mike Duggan's office. But the point here is that the bonding issue comes up because Black contractors always talk about how they're basically shortchanged, undervalued, and so forth, and that they don't have the resources, if you will, that these white contractors will have. And so basically that denies them the ability to compete on a fair basis with their white counterparts and other contractors.
Mm-hmm. So again, part of it is working collaboratively with that counterpart that did get the
Right.
contract, having subcontracting. But I can't put money in your pocket before you even come our way and sign up with the system. So it again becomes a matter of knowing what specifically is the challenge that they have. If it's just funding, we've got to work on how do we increase their revenues, because the bonding is important. We have
Right.
to ensure that these companies are bonded. I mean, we're seeing challenges right now where companies did not go through the process, and it now has created more of a issue for the city of Detroit because allegedly we allowed companies to avert that particular process, and we may be on the hook for millions of dollars as a result of that. So we can't, I can't pretend as if bonding is not important, but identifying what that contractor, that vendor's challenge is critically important. We have some folks, they say they talk to you, they got to reach out to their council members as well. They got to reach out to us so we can understand what those issues are. Because even though that's one contractor who may bring that matter up, you can only imagine that is replicated across the board with multiple. But that's not the only issue. There's other issues out there, and the more and more that we have those discussions, we're able to I believe address them. But when I've talked to some contractors who may come before us, they don't want to give me details because they're afraid of retribution from the administration. But I'm limited, right? I mean, if you're not willing to give me the details, I'm limited in how I can help you. And I've tried to create an atmosphere where I have not been abusive to anyone who comes our way. I've only tried to provide that assistance, the one-on-one as well as collectively. But the best way for me, not the only way, but the best way for me to be able to address those specific issues and not some umbrella, our Black contractors are not able to bond. The only way we can do that is having those discussions with those contractors who are having those issues. I've had that more conversations with some of our vendors who said that they, either didn't feel that they should have to go through this process as Detroiters, lifelong Detroiters, legacy Detroiters, and some have said that the process is a little bit more challenging than necessary. So again, that we're looking into that portion of it, the more challenging than necessary, but there's no way that I would feel comfortable with eliminating bonding. And I'm not saying that that's what you were implying, but trying to find that solution is not a simple one.
Right, and I think part of the issue could be also that is the tone that the council sets, right? Is Detroit open for business? And that question is not only limited to those with deep pockets and big developers and so forth, and the ones that are dancing in the streets in downtown Detroit, Midtown, and Corktown about how wonderful and great the city is. Is it open for business for those who don't even have access to downtown, who don't have access to the council president, to the mayor, to the mayor's chief of staff, to your chief of staff, and so forth? I mean, the tone that the council sets, and those people, I think, if the tone is set, then perhaps they feel somehow comfortable to come forward and be able to say, "This is my issue. This is what I'm going through," and so forth. And
yeah, I just want to push back just a little bit. There are folks who just don't participate in city government at all, right? And they just don't reach out. I'm accessible to the person in the penthouse. I'm accessible to the folks who are not in the penthouse. You name it. Again, this is all about accessibility. I don't feel to this point in my career just by only talking to those in the ivory tower. That's not how I operate. That's not how many of my colleagues operate. But we have a contingency of Detroiters who have just taken themselves out of the process and have this idea that council just doesn't care or they don't care. We just become a they. But when you talk directly to us, now we have an opportunity to specifically deal with that particular issue. One, for you, so we can get that out the way. But now we know that it's a bigger issue that we can focus on for our community as a whole. But it has to be some level of communication because we're not at the table saying, no, Detroiters don't come and bid on contracts. We're not saying that. And it's not showing up in our voting either. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have knowledge about how the council operates, if you don't have knowledge about the votes that we've made, if you haven't sat down and actually tried to reach out, which all of our numbers are online, we're not hard to find. As I said before, I host 3 general community meetings every month and have been doing that for 13 years where I'm accessible. I sit in front of the audience. They ask me questions. I run by them ideas and proposals that I've heard from the administration as well as my colleagues, and I have myself. And then I bring that to the council table. So I keep my community. And I'll say that as District 1, that's what I've been doing. And now as council president, I plan to do that even more so in a more holistic way for the city of Detroit. in respect of my colleagues in their particular districts. But, you know, I'll say that we've got to have a culture change as well in our community of folks who just don't want to get involved. And this, I mentioned I have 3 community meetings. I just added a 4th last year in October, and it's called Next Voice. And this is where I have worked with focusing on educating younger residents on how government works, their government, local government works. And we're talking between 18 and 40. We started these meetings, we started out and we had 18 folks who showed up. The last meeting, which was the 4th one, we were at 38. So we're increasing those numbers, and it's not just a dog and pony show. It's not about politics. It's about getting them engaged. And the way that I come across these folks, I'll just see them in the community. And they'll sometime want to take a selfie or something like that. We got to get past just a selfie. And I ask them, how do you feel about government? And most times they go, nah, I don't do that. No, I'm good. That's what y'all do. It ain't me. I don't do politics. And I explain to them there's a difference between politics and government. And then I invite them to these meetings. And the list I have, we initially started off with 48 invitees that I've met and my staff has met and come down to council. We go out and meet them. We started out with a list of about 48. That list has grown now. And just reaching out and having people being a part of the process and letting them know that their voice does count. It matters. So I'm not sure this idea that, how we have to set the tone. I'm trying my hardest in that direction. I'm not going to speak. I'm not saying all that at the council table. I'm trying to do it one-on-one because I think that's what counts. Most people don't watch council hearings or council sessions, but what they do know is when you have that opportunity, when you're with them, take that time to gather their information, bring them in one by one, and collectively, I think we start to see a change in our community, and they're being more aware. There's a level of trust, but there's also this what we're seeing with this group now, this empowerment that they can push their government in a way that they didn't think that they could in the past. Nobody cares, nobody listen. That's not the case.
Okay. So I want to talk about homelessness. I want to also talk about the land bank, but also talk about other economic development issues that are in the pipeline here. And I also want to talk about the public-private partnership here moving forward in 2026, how you see those things playing out. But I kind of want to get your take here because I keep hearing you talk about the past administration did not do certain things. And Mayor Mike Duggan left in a fanfare. I believe that, there are things that he achieved, and I think that there are things that he did not achieve. He left Detroit with the highest poverty rate, according to the 2024 U.S. Census report. But he left office in a fanfare. Are there things that you feel that the administration of former Mayor Mike Duggan failed to do?
Yeah, I mean, again, when it comes to, I won't say that, yeah, well, so I would say the inspection of these properties, right, that we have in the city, because that's a quality of life issue that also denigrates people's trust in the city, that we're actually looking out for them, caring for them, and making sure that their family is doing as best as possible. I think that was something that was left on the floor. There was starts and stops. When it came to helping to increase incomes, I would say that was to be continued because there were some successes that were made, but when we talk about, and I think this is where we sometimes kind of fail to remember where we started with our poverty rate and where we were as it relates to those who've been going through those challenges. We didn't start off with a city that people were making goo gobs of money, at least in the short term. And I'll just say since I've been in office, and I'll say all the way back to 2010. So this is about a gradual, trying to gradually increase, but also having to do that in a climate that continues to fluctuate. And right now, honestly, it is very, very uncertain about how the cooperation from the federal government is going to look like.
Yeah.
When it comes to I'd say that one of my big push is to make the public transportation system the best that it can be. Well, a lot of those dollars that we got for our public transportation system in the past were from the federal government. And now that has closed off. We looked at some of those other, excuse me, issues, as I mentioned, with the AMI. That's got to be something that we address. And I know that there it has been discussed in Congress a number of times,
Mhm.
but it has not gotten to the point where it has been able to even get a hearing, from what I understand. So there's a level we because we're the local government. There's a high level of expectation, but I think part of it also is we have to also work within the parameters that we have. And those parameters are, again, political, truly financial. And to your point, the mayor left in a fanfare. That wasn't just, colleagues or, the upper echelon saying, great job. That was regular Detroiters who were saying, great job. I mean, when you look at the polling, his numbers was extremely high. So there were times where I'm just going to say personally, you go in and you're ready to fight hard, but your own residents are saying, no, we think it's good. And you're explaining to folks that it's going to affect, how it's going to affect them. But they've already been
But
warmed over.
but you have an obligation to educate your residents, though.
No, absolutely. And I do. I do. I don't run away from that.
So
I don't run away
they
from
don't fall for the okie doke, like Spike Lee said. They don't get bamboozled
that.
because it's easy
Absolutely.
to get bamboozled.
Absolutely. And that's why I work on it in multiple facets. I work on it with my colleagues, but then I also, excuse me, with the residents, but then I also worked as I could with the mayor in those particular projects. There was one particular development that called for school. I'm sorry, for a tuition, not reimbursement, but basically like the college promise, right? For two schools in the city of Detroit, they would essentially have a promise program where they would allow for the students to um, be able to attend a university for no cost. They would pay for books.
Right.
Well, come to find out, it was the same doggone program that they already had. So it was nothing new that they added to this. So in that situation, the mayor already had 5 votes. I already had 5 votes. So now it's a matter of me going, and I can say no all day long, doesn't change it. So if I go and work this project out, now I ended up getting room and board, ended up getting an additional allotment of funding because that number goes up as you ascend in college. That dollar amount that you pay increases. We're able to get books um, uh, uh, as well in that particular project. So sometimes it's those things that you do is not the big splash. It's improving what is on the table. Because I'm always thinking that every move that we make, it affects somebody's life. And that somebody is important enough, whether it's 1, 12, 220. You always want to go with the masses. You always want to make sure that the masses are taken care of. But each deal that comes before us is a different deal.
Yeah. So the homeless crisis, I think we all know what it is. As we speak, there are probably lots of families in Detroit who are struggling to find a place warm to be during this, cold, brutal winter. Um, we saw what happened last year with the two little black kids who died, in their mother's vehicle in a parking lot, in a casino parking lot in downtown Detroit. And I'm wondering if that for you as council president was, what some would say enough is enough. And it's time for us to switch the pendulum to something else in view or in light of supporting, organizations that are catering to the homeless, pushing for more funding, more support, and so forth. And given that what happened with that family last year, they called the city of Detroit, didn't get a call back, and so forth. And uh, a lot of people still look at Detroit through that lens in terms of the affordability crisis, obviously, but also just the fact that we have this chronic homelessness crisis in the city of Detroit that seems to be out of control. And are we living in a city, or are we in a place where little black kids, innocent, unoffending black kids, have to die simply because they're poor, simply because they can't find a place to lay their heads at night?
Yeah, I think that's certainly the conclusion that happened with that family, and my heart is still heavy. Yeah, I can only imagine. I've got nieces and nephews. I don't have any children myself, but nieces and nephews that I love, and I can only imagine my family. my sisters and my nieces and nephews having to go through that situation and not having assistance. Um, we part of the challenge, part of the issue that we had is that to your point, they made the phone call to the city of Detroit and didn't get a return phone call. We as a city transformed that part of the process so that there was immediately, and that needed council's support to do that. And funding to also go in. So we made amendments to ensure that that part took place. That's the back end. That's just addressing those who are in a homeless situation, possibly for a night or two. But that's where I go back again, Bankole. It's got to be more than just providing assistance for that particular night. Because we're at the point where we are bursting at the seams. The places that we have for folks are non-existent. And as I mentioned earlier, people who are making $100,000 plus, they're now finding themselves in situations where they are in need of housing, where in the past that was very secure, had no issue whatsoever. So, you know, looking at that particular concern of homelessness, how do we get these individuals, one, to reach out to the city? How do we make sure that we as a city respond to them in a way that's proper, at least at first in the immediate, because we got to get them out of the cold. But then what's that long-term care, that full wraparound care that is available to these residents? Again, I have seen where it has helped, where it has worked. I'm not saying that's all the time. And I don't believe that in any situation, especially when you're talking about people, when you're talking about Black women and babies, that even one situation is, well, that's one out of 200,000. I don't look at it like that because, again, you're talking about two dead babies, right? That's a real situation. But we have to look at the scale of what we're dealing with, but then also peel back the layers. What got the family in that situation in the first place? Where, without putting any blame on anybody, where could the city have intervened to try to get them housing, get the parents, the mom, some level of I go back to upskilling because I don't believe that just giving people stuff is the best way. Sometimes you got to give it to them in the short term to get them on their feet and let them, have a sense of pride about what they do and where they are. But where was the failure? And, dissecting someone's life is not always the easiest thing if they are, one, not willing to provide that to you, or two, as government, we have limitations on intersecting in their personal affairs. So for me, that's why I've really focused on mental health in the city of Detroit. I have an initiative, Protect Your Crown. Right now is about advocacy, is about awareness, but we're moving towards advocacy and looking at what laws and what policies are in place that prevent individuals from identifying and having proper mental health care in the city of Detroit. We also got to look at physical health care because you can, your mind can be in a situation where you are, content with where you are, but your body is deteriorating. So we've got to also focus on that as well, because once your body deteriorates, now you got to go to the doctor, put you now in medical debt.
Right.
And so,
go ahead. Sorry,
okay.
go ahead.
No.
No, so I was saying the mental health issue. I want to piggy on that because I think I remember last year, Dr. Curtis Ivory, the Chancellor of the Wayne County Community College District, hosted a very successful mental health summit. And I think it was the first time I saw in the city of Detroit, we have an educational institution put the lens on mental health here in the city of Detroit, which to your point is I don't want to say if it is underrated, but it's almost as if it's treated as if it's virtually doesn't exist, or maybe because it's a taboo, right? And people don't want to talk about, mental health in among families and their cousins and their kids and so forth. And it's like it's an off limits conversation. So as relates to mental health, Joe, we have a lot of agencies and organizations, groups in the city of Detroit that work towards mental health. And I'm trying to point this to the budget that is coming up. Is it at a point, would the city's budget, as you get to approve the budget, are those things that you're going to look at, to address some of these stopgap measures? How do we support mental health organizations? How do we ensure? Because to your point, a lot of this stuff has to do with mental health. when police make a run to a home and so forth, and there's a kid in that home, 15, 14-year-old, wilding out, or even a little bit older, come to find out, sometimes it is a mental health issue, a mental health challenge, or even an adult, and so forth.
Yeah, in the past, what we did, again, when we start talking about the way that our government works, we had really been funding or providing a lot of our providing funding, but also a lot of our referrals through DWIN. And I think that they
Right.
do a good job.
Yeah,
And we
they
have
do. And the
former
chief,
Chief White.
James White,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, we got former Chief White now who's over there, and he looks at the way that he approaches mental health from an administrative side, but also from a clinical side is different than I would say one from the former CEO that was there, but also is more in line with what I would like to see from our city, from that agency. Excuse me. But with our health department, I can't tell you exactly what we, as a health department, have done to really make an impact in the area of mental health. And so
Well,
having conversations.
you can ask for a report from the health department as the council president.
Yeah, I got it. I already got it. That's my point.
Right,
So
right. Okay.
yeah, I got it already.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're now in the process. I believe that there may be a new health director that
Okay.
is coming. As Mayor Sheffield has indicated, this new department that she's putting before us that is going to be in the EOP that City Council will be voting on to approve will have an element of, will not just have an element, but will focus on mental health. Want to know what that looks like? If you're looking for us to fund this particular department that has mental health attached to it, homelessness as well, that's all in that same department. So ripping those services away from housing and revitalization department and putting it in its own standalone area, that possibly, we still have to identify because we're having these preliminary conversations about what things will look like. That possibly could be a much better solution because while we have the housing and revitalization department working on the structures, getting people or getting these structures built, there should be a whole nother group of folks who are working on the services for our people. There's another group of folks, as I mentioned before, who who should be focused on how to upskill individuals who are in need. That should not all be under one department trying to do everything because
So,
uh,
let me
it
so
won't work.
so let me ask you then, because I think that's the department that Luke Schaefer, who used to head Power
Yes.
Solutions at the University of Michigan, is going to head. I know it's a lot of items under that department. Are you concerned though that this new department that will be headed by Luke Schaefer from the University of Michigan is going to be another kind of a big bureaucracy? Is that what you're concerned about?
No, I'm not concerned because at first I've got to. I'm going to let them put the meat on the bones. Right now, I've just heard an outline, but when it comes to the budget, it's not about an outline. It's about how do you plan on executing this. When it comes to the actual EOP, Executive Operation Plan, we have to actually see and know how it's going to work. That has not been presented just yet. The finite details. We potentially will be having a special session where we will have the 7 appointees that the mayor has put before us for approval, as well as the EOP. Those are the conversations we have to have, and I think there's got to be some level of I don't want to say, I guess grace is the word because this mayor is still trying to pivot somewhat from what I hear from where things were with the former mayor. I'm seeing some of that happen. We have a council that's, while we only have 2 new members, those are 2 new members that are coming to this body who's also looking to implement their plans, who are trying to figure out what they want to do. And then for me as a council president, trying to coalesce and bring everyone together so that we are all focused on the residents of the city of Detroit. So all of this is still new. It's January,
Right,
right?
right. No,
Everything turned January 1st. We're
right,
January 26th right now.
right.
Putting those things in place, Bankole, but we don't have all of that figured out yet. But by the budget time, it shall be.
Are there any specific issues that the administration of Mayor Sheffield has reached out to you on right now as we speak?
Yeah, Basically, what I'll just say without giving away any confidentiality issues, because there's the things that are in discussion. I'll let her be the one to announce it. It really basically the programs that she's announced thus far. Just looking for more details. I mean, again, umbrella, but want to get far more details about some of the how they're going to operate. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, we talk about the first 100 days of the mayor, but we normally don't talk about the first 100 days of the city council. First 100 days of city council items, affordable housing, what else?
again, the budget. That's our
The
first
budget. Yeah,
100 days. Budget is huge.
right.
But then also again, understanding how this administration is going to operate. We cannot. I think sometimes we get into the point where we just look at council as if it's its own separate body. And again, not saying you, but this is again a strong mayor form of government. So there's got to be some level of cooperation. And if it's not going to be a level of cooperation now, the nuclear option has to be pulled. But that to me should not be the first thing. It should be about conversation. It should be about negotiation and about evaluation. And at that point, it's about accountability. But when all that fails, now the nuclear option has to be pushed. And now it's just this is what we're not seeing. Now we have to go full tilt in that direction. I don't believe we're there yet. But we also don't have all the details about how this particular administration that's still, again, I told you we're putting we have 7 appointees that are coming before us for approval. Still getting the
You've
bodies in place that
requested,
are going
have
to
you
do it.
you've requested information regarding those appointees and
Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, they're the same appointees that have sat in those
okay,
seats
okay, it's just a
already. So we know.
reconfirmation.
Yeah, essentially. But it has to go through them. And so we could always go, yeah, we know them. Let's go ahead and send them through. That's not what we're doing. We're having confirmation here so that we're bringing them before us, having them to respond to some of these things that we're talking about in this particular discussion. How do they, as a department head,
Well, if
you're
some of the
never going to be the
if
one
some
to
of
talk.
these appointees were part of previous problems, I'm wondering then how do you go through the confirmation?
Yeah, but I think part of it is also you got to bring again. This is where I always go back to. This is they're part of an administration, right? And this is not to let them off the hook, but I know because I worked for the city prior to being a city council member, and
Right.
you were an appointee of a particular administration, so you have to execute based upon what that administration allows you to do or doesn't allow you to do. So
Or you
that's why.
resign. You have a choice. You execute or resign.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but again, if you don't see that you're hurting people, why would you resign? There's
Yeah.
many ways to do things, right? You
Right.
may not agree with it. We may
Right.
not agree, but if I'm not overtly hurting someone, why would I resign? Because I'm not doing it the way that this person feels they're doing. Many of these directors felt that they were doing great things and doing them exactly the way that it need to be done. Some of them, quietly they would say, man, I wish we could do it a certain way, but this is what's being put before me. I've got to move in this particular direction. But it was never, whenever I got those kind of conversations, it was never a situation where it was um, a situation where they were trying to hurt people.
Right. Okay. Two items before we round this up. The land bank situation here. There's increasing concern, complaints from residents about the state of the Detroit Land Bank Authority. Are you at some point going to table before that city council the fate of the land bank to deal with the problems that it's been dealing with? There was an audit came out with its budget,
Yep.
that raised red flags, lots of red flags about the land bank budget and so forth. And some ugly stuff in there, what was reported about the budget and so forth. That's just one more item, on top of the other complaints that residents have about the land bank. They feel like it's, if you don't have, some feel like if you don't have deep pockets, well, you're not going to get no kind of support or leeway with the land bank. And there were also complaints about how, I remember somebody shared with me about just they woke up one day and just saw their entire neighborhood properties being gobbled up by companies that are not in Michigan. You look it up, they're somewhere maybe in California, New York, or even out of the country. I say all that to say that the land bank is a problem, and that reality doesn't escape anybody. How does the president of the city council yourself deal with that in 2026?
So, and I do have to go after this one because I've
Yeah,
got that FRC meeting.
sure.
The way that I plan to approach it is similar to how I approached it when I was the chair of PED, and I know that I got a lot of grief from some people and colleagues as well, or a colleague at least. But the reality is, um, and I go back again. This is partially the when the land bank was stood up in this particular iteration, the mayor had all appointees on the board. That has to change. That's one thing, right? But it doesn't change because council wants it to change and we write a resolution. There has to be a level of, again, that cooperation where the mayor is either willing to stand down because, again, the political wins are also part of the conversation. You talk about a mayor again, it had fanfare, 80+% approval. When you talk about the other folks who in the state legislature and elsewhere, that was a pretty large gorilla, so to speak, in terms of just of projection, right? There was ways that we can make some movement, but that was not one that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so just talking about it and saying this is what I'm upset about matters not. The reality is here's an opportunity with a new mayor in this seat who comes from council, mm-hmm. who understands those issues. And while the report was in the final year of this particular administration,
yes,
nothing was going to happen in this particular in that instance. So now we're at the point where I've already started to have those conversations with the mayor, but not knowing exactly where all of my colleagues are. So not about individual, and I've said this even when I was the chair of planning and economic development, don't go as a council member solely trying to change the land bank. It has to be the body, because if we get to a point, and this was part of the contention, if you're going out saying, this is how you want to see it, this is how you want to see it, but you're not working with your colleagues to actually make that happen, it doesn't move. It doesn't go anywhere. So colleagues have different opinions on some of the challenges that we see with the land bank. Clearly, when you look at the report, all of those items need to be addressed. But the question is, how do we address them? I don't believe that you just throw and get rid of the land bank based on its flexibility that we have. Because I was, on council. I'm the only council member that's been elected at large as well as by district. When I first came on, I was at large, and all of these properties were in planning and development. They took forever to be able to be disposed of. That was a major, major challenge. So the land bank provides a tool and more flexibility. It's the way that it operates. So I am not in support of getting rid of the land bank, but those are the conversations we got to have, because some council members have said, I want to get rid of it. But if you're going to get rid of it, you got to make sure there's something else on the back end. You got to make sure through the folks who actually are in operations that you are able to address those concerns still as a city, and not just, well, now the land bank doesn't exist, so now what? It's got to be more than just my feelings. It's got to be about collaboration, cooperation, negotiation, and accountability once again. But it doesn't happen just because, even if I just host a town hall, I can get information, get everybody agitated. But if I'm not trying to actually change things, I've just made it be known how I individually feel, as opposed to working with colleagues.
But town hall, I think it's important, because you get to get
Absolutely.
the residents their take, and it's almost like a jury on public policy, and you hear from real people as opposed to being at city council and feeling like this is how the people think.
But Bankole, again, this is where I go back to it kind of like trips me out when people feel as if no real people come to council, right? That the only way I can talk to real people is in a town hall. I again continue to stress that personally myself, mm-hmm. I talk to residents on a regular basis, and it has not just started because of an issue. This is a part of my ethos. This is where I stand, period. The community is the reason why I do what I do. I'm not, it's taken me this long to get to the point of being council president, or even put my name in a hat, because it's not my focus. My focus is working on the average Detroiter. How do we get them to have a better life? How do we get them to a point where the city works on their behalf with all of these pressures that are around them that is constantly making life more challenging? How do we not be another one of those pressures that harms them?
Yeah. And in 20 seconds, finally, more tax breaks for big developers in the city of Detroit, like we see downtown, midtown, Corktown, or no tax breaks in 2026?
No, I can't say no tax breaks because, again, as I said, this is a tool that we have to use, in my opinion. This gives us leverage because.
But are you getting more for the tool or less?
So if you have a property that has not been generating any tax dollars, and when we look at income tax and property taxes, they make up almost 45% of our general fund. So once we increase those property taxes, the income taxes, it helps the overall dollar amount for the city, the revenues. So if you have a space that has not been, again, activated and it's bringing down a neighborhood,
right,
and you have a developer, and I hate them. I can't say I love tax. I'm not that guy. I when I was that all the way back in 2009, I campaigned. We're going to get rid of them, get rid of them. Then you get on the inside and you realize, not because I'm an insider and I'm thinking like an insider, but I also look at how these developments are pulled together, the performance. When I talk to the lenders, when I talk to our Black developers as well, not just the big dogs downtown, when I talk to our folks who are struggling trying to get in our neighborhoods, they're talking about, I need help. We need assistance. So it's not just one or the other. We got to help all because we are still a major city. And if we're talking about downtown, if we're able to get masses or larger groups of people and get that income tax from them that we weren't getting before, that's a plus. If we're looking at property tax, where again, maybe you're that space, if we owned it as a city, we're getting no dollars from it. Been vacant for decades. If it's a building that was owned by a private owner, after a certain period of time, those dollars are minuscule in terms of property tax. They just sit on them. How can we get them activated, developed, and move forward? And some folks say that they're going to do it anyway. Well, I'll tell you, that's not the case. That's not the case. Do we make it more appealing? Absolutely. But I was also, when the Super Bowl was here, I was the second deputy chief in charge of the Office of Public Information at the police department. And I remember we had wraps around the buildings to make them look occupied in our downtown. That was the reality of where we stood at that time. Part of our revenue has to also be tourism, has to also be arts, culture, entertainment. It's not just, we have to find other ways to diversify our revenue. Let me just put it that way.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Council President James Tate, for being here.
Thank you for having me, sir. I appreciate you, man.
All right. Okay. We'll talk again soon.
Absolutely.